She said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Janshah took the way for where lived Sheikh Nasser, the king of the birds. And he ceased not faring on many days and nights, tearful-eyed and heavy-hearted, eating when he was anhungered of the growth of the ground and drinking, when he thirsted of its streams, till he came in sight of the castle of the Lord Solomon, and saw Sheikh Nasser sitting at the gate. So he hastened up to him and kissed his hands, and the sheikh saluted him and bade him welcome and said to him, O my son, what aileth thee that thou returnest to this place, after I sent thee home with the Princess Shamsa, cool of eyes and broad of breast? Janshah wept and told him all that had befallen him and how she had flown away from him, saying, An thou love me, come to me in Takni, the castle of jewels. At which the old man marvelled and said, By Allah, O my son, I know it not, nor by the virtue of our Lord Solomon have I ever in my life heard its name. Quoth Janshah, What shall I do? I am dying of love and longing. Quoth Sheikh Nasser, Take patience until the coming of the birds, when we will enquire at them of Takni, the castle of jewels. Haply one of them shall wot thereof. So Janshah's heart was comforted, and entering the palace, he went straight to the chamber which gave upon the lake in which he had seen the 3 maidens. After this he abode with Sheikh Nasser for a while, and one day as he was sitting with him, the sheikh said, O my son, rejoice, for the time of the birds coming draweth nigh. Janshah gladdened to hear the news, and after a few days the birds began to come, and Sheikh Nasser said to him, O my son, learn these names and address thyself with me to meet the birds. Presently the fowls came flying up and saluted Sheikh Nasser, kind after kind, and he asked them of Takni, the castle of jewels, but they all made answer, Never heard we of such a place. At these words Janshah wept and lamented till he swooned away, whereupon Sheikh Nasser called a huge volatile and said to him, Carry this youth to the land of Kabul, and describe to him the country and the way thither. Then he set Janshah on the bird's back, saying, Be careful to sit straight and beware of leaning to either side, else thou wilt be torn to pieces in the air. And stop thine ears from the wind, lest thou be dazed by the noise of the revolving sphere and the roaring of the seas. Janshah resolved to do his bidding, and the bird took flight high in sky and flew with him a day and a night, till he set him down by the king of the beasts, whose name was Shah Badri, and said to his rider, We have gone astray from the way directed by Sheikh Nasser. And he would have taken him up again and flown on with him, but Janshah said, Go thy ways and leave me here, till I die on this spot, or I find Takni, the castle of jewels, I will not return to my country. So the fowl left him with Shah Badri, king of the beasts, and flew away. The king thereupon said to him, O my son, who art thou, and whence comest thou with yonder great bird? So Janshah told him his story from beginning to end, whereat Shah Badri marvelled and said, By the virtue of the Lord Solomon, I know not of this castle, but if any one of the beasts my subjects know it, we will reward him bountifully and send thee by him thither. Hereat Janshah wept bitterly, but presently he took patience and abode with Shah Badri, and after a short time the king of the beasts said to him, O my son, take these tablets and commit to memory that which is therein, and when the beasts come, we will question them of the castle of jewels. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now when it was the 523rd night, she continued, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the king of the beasts said to Janshah, Commit to memory what is 369 in these tablets, and when as the beasts come, we will ask them anent that castle. He did as the king bade him, and before long up came the beasts kind after kind, and saluted Shah Badri, who questioned them of Takni, the castle of jewels. But they all replied, We know not this castle, nor ever heard we of it. At this Janshah wept and lamented for that he had not gone with the bird that brought him from Sheikh Nasser's castle. But Shah Badri said to him, Grieve not, O my son, for I have a brother, King Shimek hight, who is older than I. He was once a prisoner to King Solomon, for that he rebelled against him. Nor is there among the jinn one elder than he and Sheikh Nasser. Belike he knoweth of this castle, at any rate he ruleth over all the jinn in this countryside. So saying, he set Janshah on the back of a beast and gave him a letter to his brother, commending him to his care. The beast set off with the prince forthwith, and fared on days and nights, till it came to King Shimak's abiding place, and when it caught sight of the king it stood still afar off, whereupon Janshah alighted and walked on till he found himself in the presence. Then he kissed hands and presented his brother's letter. The king read the missive, and having mastered the meaning, welcomed the prince, saying, By Allah, O my son, in all my born days I never saw nor heard of this castle, adding, as Janshah burst into tears, But tell me thy story, and who and whence thou art, and whither thou art bound. So Janshah related to him his history from beginning to end, at which Shimek marvelled and said, O my son, I do not believe that even the Lord Solomon ever saw this castle or heard thereof. But O my son, I know a monk in the mountains, who is exceeding old, and whom all birds and beasts and Jann obey. for he ceased not his conjurations against the kings of the Jann, till they submitted themselves to him in their own despite, by reason of the might of his oaths and his magic, and now all the birds and the beasts are his servants. I myself once rebelled against King Solomon, and he sent against me this monk, the only being who could overcome me with his craft and his conjurations and his gramarye. Then he imprisoned me, and since that time I have been his vassal. He hath travelled in all countries and quarters, and knoweth all ways and regions and places and castles and cities, nor do I think there is any 370 place hidden from his ken, so needs must I send thee to him, haply he may direct thee to the castle of jewels. And if he cannot do this, none can, for all things obey him, birds and beasts and the very mountains, and come at his beck and call, by reason of his skill in magic. Moreover, by the might of his egromancy he hath made a staff in 3 pieces, and this he planteth in the earth and conjureth over it, whereupon flesh and blood issue from the first piece, sweet milk from the second, and wheat and barley from the third. Then he withdraweth the staff and returneth to his place, which is hight the hermitage of diamonds, and this magical monk is a cunning inventor and artificer of all manner strange works, and he is a crafty warlock full of guiles and wiles, an arch-deceiver of wondrous wickedness, who hath mastered every kind of magic and witchcraft. His name is Yagmas, and to him I must needs send thee on the back of a big bird with 4 wings. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now when it was the 524th night, she pursued, it hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Shimak said to Janshah, I must needs send thee to the monk Yagmas on the back of a big bird with 4 wings, each measuring 30 Hashemi cubits in length, and it hath feet like those of an elephant, but it flieth only twice a year. And there was with King Shimak an officer, by name Timshun, who used every day to carry off 2 Bactrian camels from the land of Iraq, and cut them up for the bird that it might eat them. So King Shimak bade the fowl take up Janshah and bear him to the cell of the hermit Yagmas, and it rose into the air and flew on days and nights, till it came to the mountain of the citadels and the hermitage of diamonds, where Janshah alighted, and going up to the hermitage, found Yagmas the monk at his devotions. So he entered the chapel, and kissing the ground stood respectfully before the hermit. When Yagmas saw him, he said, Welcome, O my son, O parted from thy home and guard fareforth to Rome, tell me the cause 371 of thy coming hither. So Janshah wept and acquainted him with all that had befallen him from beginning to end, and that he was in quest of the castle of jewels. The monk marvelled greatly at his story and said, By Allah, O my son, never in my life heard I of this castle, nor ever saw I one who had heard of it or had seen it, for all I was alive in the days of Noah, Allah's prophet, on whom be peace, and I have ruled the birds and beasts and jinn ever since his time, nor do I believe that Solomon David's son himself knew of it. But wait till the birds and beasts and chiefs of the Jann come to do their homage to me, and I will question them of it. Peradventure, some one of them may be able to give us news of it, and Allah Almighty shall make all things easy to thee. So Janshah homed with the hermit until the day of the assembly, when all the birds and beasts in Jann came to swear fealty, and Yagmas and his guest questioned them anent Takni, the castle of jewels, but they all replied, We never saw or heard of such a place. At this Janshah fell a-weeping and lamenting, and humbled himself before the Most High. But as he was thus engaged, behold, there flew down from the heights of air another bird, big of bulk and black of blee, which had tarried behind the rest, and kissed the hermit's hands. Yagmas asked it of Takni, the castle of jewels, and it answered, saying, O monk, when I and my brothers were small chicks, we abode behind the mountain Kaf on a hill of crystal, in the midst of a great desert, and our father and mother used to set out for it every morning, and in the evening come back with our food. They went out early one day, and were absent from us a sennight, and hunger was sore upon us. But on the 8th day they returned, both weeping, and we asked them the reason of their absence. Quoth they, A Marid swooped down on us and carried us off in his claws to Takni, the castle of jewels, and brought us before King Shahlan, who would have slain us. But we told him that we had left behind us a brood of fledglings, so he spared our lives and let us go. And were my parents yet in the bonds of life, they would give thee news of the castle. When Janshah heard this, he wept bitter tears and said to the hermit, Prithee bid the bird carry me to his father and mother's nest on the 372 crystal hill, behind the mountain Kaf. So the hermit said, O bird, I desire thee to obey this youth in whatsoever he may command thee. I hear and obey thy bidding, replied the fowl, and taking Janshah on its back, flew with him days and nights without ceasing till it set him down on the hill of crystal, and there alighted. And having delayed there a resting while, it again set him on its back and flew off and ceased not flying for 2 whole days till it reached the spot where the nest was. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now when it was the 525th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the fowl ceased not flying with Jantia 2 full days, till it reached the spot where the nest was, and set him down there and said, O Jantia, this is where our nest was. He wept sore and replied, I pray thee bear me farther on to where thy parents used to forage for food. The bird consented, so it took him up again and flew on with him 7 nights and 8 days, till it set him down on the top of a high hill Karma's height and left him there saying, I know of no land behind this hill. Then it flew away, and Jantia sat down on the hilltop and fell asleep. When he awoke, he saw something gleaming afar off as it were lightning and filling the firmament with its flashings, and he wondered what this sheen could be without wotting that it was the castle he sought. So he descended the mountain and made towards the light, which came from Takni, the castle of jewels, distant 2 months' journey from Karmas, the hill whereon he had alit, and its foundations were fashioned of red rubies and its buildings of yellow gold. Moreover, it had 1,000 turrets builded of precious metals, and stones of price studded and set in the minerals brought from the main of Merks, and on this account it was named the Castle of Jewels, Takni. It was a vast great castle, and the name of its king was King Sharlan, the father of the Lady Shamsa and her sisters. Such was the case with Jantia, but as regards Princess Shamsa, when she fled from Jantia, she made straight for the Castle of Jewels and told her father and mother all that had passed between the prince and herself, how he had wandered the world and seen its marvels and wonders 373, and how fondly he loved her, and how dearly she loved him. Quoth they, Thou hast not dealt righteously with him, as Allah would have thee deal. Moreover, King Sharlan repeated the story to his guards and officers of the marrieds of the jinn, and bade them bring him every mortal they should see. For the Lady Shamsa had said to her parents, Jantia loveth me with passionate love, and forsir he will follow me, for when flying from his father's roof I cried to him, An thou love me, seek me at Takni, the castle of jewels. Now when Jantia beheld that sheen and shine, he made straight for it, wishing to find out what it might be. And as chance would have it, Shamsa had that very day dispatched a Marid on an occasion in the direction of the hill Karmas, and on his way thither he caught sight of a man, a mortal, so he hastened up to him and saluted him. Jantia was terrified at his sight, but returned his salam, and the Marid asked, What is thy name? And he answered, My name is Jantia, and I have fallen madly in love with a jinnia known as Princess Shamsa, who captivated me by her beauty and loveliness. But despite my dear love she fled from the palace wherein I placed her, and behold, I am here in quest of her. Herewith he wept with bitter weeping. The Marid looked at him, and his heart burned with pity on hearing the sad tale, and he said, Weep not, for surely thou art come to thy desire. Know that she loveth thee fondly, and hath told her parents of thy love for her, and all in yonder castle love thee for her sake. So be of good cheer, and keep thine eyes cool of tear. Then he took him on his shoulders, and made off with him to the castle of jewels, Takni. Thereupon the bearers of fair tidings hastened to report his coming, and when the news reached Shamsa and her father and mother, they all rejoiced with exceeding joy, and King Sharlan took horse and rode out, commanding all his guards and ifrits and marids honourably to meet the prince. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now when it was the 526th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that King Sharlan commanded all his guards and ifrits and marids to meet the prince, and as soon as he came up with him, he 374 dismounted and embraced him, and Jantia kissed his hand. Then Sharlan bade put on him a robe of honour of many-coloured silk, laced with gold and set with jewels, and a coronet such as man never saw, and mounting him on a splendid mare of the steeds of the kings of the jinn, took horse himself, and with an immense retinue riding on the right hand and the left, brought him in great state to the castle. Jantia marvelled at the splendour of this edifice, with its walls builded of rubies and other jewels, and its pavement of crystal and jasper and emerald, and fell a-weeping at the memory of his past miseries. But the king and queen, Shamsa's mother, wiped away his tears and said, Now no more weeping, and be of good cheer, for thou hast won to thy will. Then Sharlan carried him into the inner court of the castle, where he was received by a multitude of beautiful damsels and pages and black jinn slaves, who seated him in the place of honour and stood to do him service, whilst he was lost in amazement at the goodliness of the place and its walls all edified of precious metals and jewels of price. Presently King Sharlan repaired to his hall of audience, where he sat down on his throne, and, bidding the slave girls and the pages introduce the prince, rose to receive him and seated him by his side on the throne. Then he ordered the tables to be spread, and they ate and drank and washed their hands, after which in came the Queen Shamsa's mother, and saluting Jantia, bade him welcome in these words, Thou hast come to thy desire after weariness, and thine eyes shall now sleep after watching, so praised be Allah for thy safety." Thus saying, she went away and forthwith returned with the Princess Shamsa, who saluted Janshah and kissed his hands, hanging her head in shame and confusion before him and her parents, after which as many of her sisters as were in the palace came up to him and greeted him in like manner. Then quoth the queen to him, "Welcome, O my son, our daughter Shamsa hath indeed sinned against thee, but do thou pardon her misdeed for our sakes." When Janshah heard this, he cried out and fell down fainting, whereat the king marvelled, and they sprinkled on his face rose water mingled with musk and civet, till he came to himself, and looking at Princess Shamsa said, "Praised be Allah who hath brought me to my desire and hath quenched the fire of my heart." Replied she, "May he preserve thee from the fire. But now tell me, O Janshah, what hath befallen thee since our parting, and how thou madest thy way to this place, seeing that few even of 375 the Jan ever heard of Takni, the castle of jewels, and we are independent of all the kings, nor any wotteth the road hither." Thereupon he related to her every adventure and peril and hardship he had suffered, and how he had left his father at war with King Kafid, ending with these words, "And all for thy sake, my lady Shamsa." Quoth the queen, "Now hast thou thy heart's desire, for the princess is thy handmaid, and we give her in free gift to thee." Janshah joyed exceedingly at these words, and the queen added, "Next month, if it be the will of Almighty Allah, we will have a brave wedding and celebrate the marriage festival, and after the knot is tied, we will send you both back to thy native land, with an escort of 1,000 marids of our bodyguard, the least of whom, and thou bid him slay King Kafid and his folk, would surely destroy them to the last man in the twinkling of an eye. Furthermore, if it please thee, we will send thee, year after year, a company of which each and every can so do with all thy foes." And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now when it was the 527th night, she continued, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the lady Shamsa's mother ended with saying, and if it so please thee, we will send thee, year after year, a company of which each and every can destroy thy foes to the last man." Then King Shahlan sat down on his throne, and summoning his grandees and officers of state, bade them make ready for the marriage festivities, and decorate the city 7 days and nights. "We hear and we obey," answered they, and busied themselves 2 months in the preparations, after which they celebrated the marriage of the prince and princess, and held a mighty festival. Never was there its like. Then they brought Janshah in to his bride, and he abode with her in all solace of life and delight for 2 years, at the end of which time he said to her, "Thy father promised to send us to my native land, that we might pass 1 year there and the next here." Answered she, "I hear and obey," and going into King Shahlan at nightfall told him what the prince had said. Quoth he, "I consent, but have patience with me till the 1st of the month, that I may make ready for your departure." She repeated these words to her husband, and they waited till the appointed time, when the king bade 376 his marids bring out to them a great litter of red gold, set with pearls and jewels, and covered with a canopy of green silk, purfled in a profusion of colours and embroidered with precious stones, dazzling with its goodliness the eyes of every beholder. He chose out 4 of his marids to carry the litter in whichever of the 4 quarters the riders might choose. Moreover, he gave his daughter 300 beautiful damsels to wait upon her, and bestowed on Janshah the like number of white slaves of the sons of the jinn. Then the lady Shamsa took formal leave of her mother and sisters, and all her kith and kin, and her father fared forth with them. So the 4 marids took up the litter, each by one corner, and rising under it like birds in air, flew onward with it between earth and heaven till midday, when the king bade them set it down, and all alighted. Then they took leave of one another, and King Shahlan commended Shamsa to the prince's care, and giving them in charge to the marids, returned to the castle of jewels, whilst the prince and princess remounted the litter, and the marids taking it up, flew on for 10 whole days, in each of which they accomplished 30 months' journey, till they sighted the capital of King Tegmus. Now one of them knew the land of Kabul, so when he saw the city, he bade the others let down the litter at that populous place which was the capital. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now when it was the 528th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the married guards let down the litter at the capital of King Tegmus, who had been routed, and had fled from his foes into the city, where he was in sore straits. King Kafid having laid close siege to him, he sought to save himself by making peace with the king of Hind, but his enemy would give him no quarter, so seeing himself without resource or means of relief, he determined to strangle himself, and to die and be at rest from this trouble and misery. Accordingly he bade his viziers and emirs farewell, and entered his house to take leave of his harem, and the whole realm was full of weeping and wailing and lamentation and woe. And whilst this rout and hurly-burly was enacting, behold, the Marids descended with the litter upon the palace that was in the citadel. And Janshah bade 377 them set it down in the midst of the divan. They did his bidding, and he alighted with his company of handmaids and mamelukes, and, seeing all the folk of the city in straits and desolation and sore distress, said to the princess, O love of my heart and coolth of mine eyes, look in what a piteous plight is my sire. Thereupon she bade the Marid guard fall upon the beleaguering host and slay them, saying, Kill ye all, even to the last man. And Janshah commanded one of them, by name Karatash, who was exceeding strong and valiant, to bring King Kafid to him in chains. So they set down the litter and covered it with the canopy. Then, having waited till midnight, they attacked the enemy's camp, one of them being a match for 10, or at least for 8. And while these smote the foes with iron maces, those mounted their magical elephants and soared high in the lift, and then swooping down and snatching up their opponents, tear them to pieces in midair. But Karatash made straight for Kafid's tent, where he found him lying in a couch. So he took him up, shrieking for fear, and flew with him to Janshah, who bade the 4 Marids bind him on the litter and hang him high in the air over his camp, that he might witness the slaughter of his men. They did as the prince commanded them, and left Kafid, who had swooned for fear, hanging between earth and air and buffeting his face for grief. As for King Tegmus, when he saw his son, he well nigh died for excess of joy, and crying with a loud cry, fell down in a swoon. They sprinkled rose water on his face, till he came to himself, when he and his son embraced and wept with sore weeping, for he knew not that the Jinn guard were battling with King Kafid's men. Then Princess Shamsa accosted the king, and kissing his hand, said to him, Sire, be pleased to go up with me to the palace roof, and witness the slaughter of thy foes by my father's Marids. So he went up to the terrace roof, and sitting down there with his daughter-in-law, enjoyed watching the Marids do havoc among the besiegers, and break a way through the length and breadth of them. For one of them smote with his iron mace upon the elephants and their riders, and pounded them till man was not to be distinguished from beast, whilst another shouted in the faces of those who fled, so that they fell down dead. And the third caught up 378 a score of horsemen, beasts and all, and towering with them high in air cast them down on earth, so that they were torn in pieces. And this was high enjoyment for Janshah and his father and the lady Shamsa. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now when it was the 529th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that King Tegmus and his son and daughter-in-law went up to the terrace roof, and enjoyed a prospect of the Jinn guards battling with the beleaguering host. And King Kafid, still hanging between heaven and earth, also saw the slaughter of his troops, and wept sore and buffeted his face. Nor did the carnage cease among the army of Hind for 2 whole days, till they were cut off even to the last man. Then Janshah commanded a Marid, by name Shimwal, chain up King Kafid with manacles and fetters, and imprison him in a tower called the Black Bulwark. And when his bidding was done, King Tegmus bade beat the drums, and dispatched messengers to announce the glad news to Janshah's mother, informing her of his approach. Whereupon she mounted in great joy, and she no sooner espied her son than she clasped him in her arms, and swooned away for stress of gladness. They sprinkled rose water on her face till she came to herself, when she embraced him again and again wept for excess of joy. And when the lady Shamsa knew of her coming, she came to her and saluted her, and they embraced each other, and after remaining embraced for an hour sat down to converse. Then King Tegmus threw open the city gates and dispatched couriers to all parts of the kingdom, to spread the tidings of his happy deliverance, whereupon all his princely vassals and emirs, and the grandees of the realm flocked to salute him, and give him joy of his victory, and of the safe return of his son. And they brought him great store of rich offerings and curious presents. The visits and oblations continued for some time, after which the king made a second and a more splendid bride feast for the Princess Shamsa, and bade decorate the city, and held high festival. Lastly they unveiled and paraded the bride before Janshah, with apparel and ornaments of the utmost magnificence, and when her bridegroom went in to her, he presented her with 100 beautiful slave girls, 379 to wait upon her. Some days after this the princess repaired to the king and interceded with him for Kafid, saying, Suffer him return to his own land, and if henceforward he be minded to do thee a hurt, I will bid one of the Jinn guard snatch him up and bring him to thee. Replied Tegmus, I hear and I obey, and bade Shimwal bring him the prisoner, who came manacled and fettered and kissed earth between his hands. Then he commanded to strike off his chains, and mounting him on a lame mare said to him, Verily Princess Shamsa hath interceded for thee, so begone to thy kingdom, but if thou fall again to thine old tricks, she will send one of the Marids to seize thee and bring thee hither. Thereupon King Kafid set off homewards in the sorriest of plights, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now when it was the 530th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that King Kafid set off homewards in the sorriest of plights, whilst Janshah and his wife abode in all solace and delight of life, making the most of its joyance and happiness." All this recounted the youth sitting between the tombs unto Bulukiya, ending with, "And behold, I am Janshah who witnessed all these things, O my brother, O Bulukiya." Then Bulukiya, who was wandering the world in his love for Mohammed, whom Allah bless and keep, asked Janshah, "O my brother, what be these two sepulchres, and why sittest thou between them, and what causeth thy weeping?" He answered, "Know, O Bulukiya, that we abode in all solace and delight of life, passing 1 year at home and the next at Takni, the castle of jewels, whither we betook not ourselves but in the litter borne by the Marids, and flying between heaven and earth." Quoth Bulukiya, "O my brother, O Janshah, what was the distance between the castle and thy home?" Quoth he, "Every day we accomplished a journey of 30 months, and the time we took was 10 days. We abode on this wise a many of years till, 1 year we set out for the castle of jewels, as was our wont, and on the way thither alighted from the litter in this island to rest and take our pleasure therein. We sat down on the river bank and ate and drank, after which the lady Shamsa, having a mind to bathe, put off her clothes and plunged into the 380 water. Her women did likewise, and they swam about a while, whilst I walked on along the bank of the stream, leaving them to swim about and play with one another. And behold, a huge shark of the monsters of the deep seized the princess by the leg, without touching any of the girls, and she cried out and died forthright, whilst the damsels fled out of the river to the pavilion, to escape from the shark. But after a while they returned, and taking up her corpse carried her to the litter. Now when I saw her dead, I fell down fainting, and they sprinkled water on my face, till I recovered and wept over her. Then I dispatched the jinn guards to her parents and family, announcing what had befallen her, and in the shortest time they came to the spot and washed her and shrouded her, after which they buried her by the riverside and made mourning for her. They would have carried me with them to their own country, but I said to King Shahlan, "I beseech thee to dig me a grave beside her tomb, that when I die I may be buried by her side in that grave." Accordingly the king commanded one of his Marids to do as I wished, after which they departed and left me here to weep and mourn for her till I die. And this is my story and the cause of my sojourn between these two tombs. And he repeated these 2 couplets. "The house, sweetheart, is now no home to me, since thou art gone, nor neighbour neighbourly. The friend whilom I took to heart no more, is friend, and brightest lights lose brilliancy." But when Bulukiya heard out Janshah's tale he marvelled, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased saying her permitted say. Now when it was the 531st night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Bulukiya heard out Janshah's tale he wondered and exclaimed, By Allah, methought I had indeed wandered over the world and compassed it about, but now I forget all I have seen after listening 381 to these adventures of thine." He was silent a while and then resumed, "I beg thee, of thy favour and courtesy, to direct me in the way of safety." So Janshah directed him into the right road, and Bulukiya farewelled him and went his ways. All this the Serpent Queen related to Hazib Karim al-Din, and he asked her, "But how knowest thou of these things?" And she answered, "O Hazib, thou must ken that I had occasion, some 25 years ago, to send one of my largest serpents to Egypt, and gave her a letter for Bulukiya, saluting him. So she went there willingly, for she had a daughter in the land called Bint Shumuk, and after asking anent Bulukiya, she found him and gave him my missive. He read it and replied to the messenger snake, Thou comest from the Queen of the Serpents, whom I am minded to visit, for I have an occasion to her. She replied, I hear and obey. Then she bore him to her daughter, of whom she took leave, and said to her companion, Close thine eyes. So he closed them, and opening them again, behold, he found himself on the mountain where I now am. Then his guide carried him to a great serpent, whom he saluted, whereupon quoth she, Didst thou deliver the missive to Bulukiya? And she replied, Even so, and he hath accompanied me, and here he standeth. Presently Bulukiya asked after me, the Serpent Queen, and the great serpent answered, She hath gone to the mountain Kaf with all her host, as is her wont in winter, but next summer she will come hither again. As often as she goeth thither, she appointeth me to reign in her room during her absence, and if thou have any occasion to her, I will accomplish it for thee. Said he, I beg thee to bring me the herb, which whoso crusheth and drinketh the juice thereof, sickeneth not, neither groweth grey nor dieth. I will not bring it, said the serpent, till thou tell me what befell thee since thou leftest the Queen of the Serpents, to go with a fan in quest of King Solomon's tomb. So he related to her all his travels and adventures, together with the history of Janshah, and said at last, Grant me my request that I may return to mine own country. Replied the serpent, By the virtue of the Lord Solomon, I know not where is to be found the herb whereof thou speakest. Then she bade the serpent which had brought him thither carry him back to Egypt. So the messenger obeyed her 382 and said to him, Shut thine eyes. He did so, and opening them again found himself on the mountain Mukatam. When I returned from the mountain Kaf, added the queen, the serpent my deputy, informed me of Bulukiya's visit, and gave me his salutations, and repeated to me his story and his meeting with Janshah. And this, O Hazib, is how I came to know the adventures of Bulukiya and the history of Janshah. Thereupon Hazib said to her, O queen, deign recount to me what befell Bulukiya as regards his return to Egypt. She replied, Know, O Hazib, that when he parted from Janshah he fared on nights and days till he came to a great sea. So he anointed his feet with the juice of the magical herb, and walking over the face of the waters, sped onwards till he came to an island abounding in trees and springs and fruits, as it were the Garden of Eden. He landed and walked about, till he saw an immense tree, with leaves as big as the sails of a ship. So he went up to the tree and found under it a table spread with all manner meats, whilst on a branch of the branches sat a great bird, whose body was of pearls and leek green emeralds, its feet of silver, its beak of red carnelian, and its plumery of precious metals. And it was engaged in singing the praises of Allah the Most High and blessing Mohammed, on whom be benediction and peace. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now when it was the 532nd night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Bulukiya landed and walked about the island, he found therein many marvels, especially a bird whose body was of pearls and leek green emeralds, and its plumery of precious metals. And it was engaged in singing the praises of Allah the Most High and blessing Mohammed, upon whom be benediction and peace. Seeing this he said, Who and what art thou? Quoth the bird, I am one of the birds of Eden, and followed Adam when Allah Almighty cast him out thence. And know, O my brother, 383, that Allah also cast out with him 4 leaves of the trees of the garden, to cover his nakedness withal, and they fell to the ground after a while. One of them was eaten by a worm, and of it came silk. The gazelles ate the second, and thence proceeded musk. The third was eaten by bees, and gave rise to honey, whilst the fourth fell in the land of Hind, and from it sprang all manner of spices. As for me, I wandered over the face of earth till Allah deigned give me this island for a dwelling place, and I took up my abode here. And every Friday from night till morning the saints and princes of the faith flock to this place, and make pious visitation, and eat from this table spread by Allah Almighty. And after they have eaten, the table is taken up again to heaven, nor doth the food ever waste or corrupt. So Bulukiya ate his fill of the meats and praised the great Creator. And presently, behold, there came up Alkhizr, with whom be peace, at sight of whom Bulukiya rose and saluting him, was about to withdraw, when the bird said to him, Sit, O Bulukiya, in the presence of Alkhizr, on whom be peace. So he sat down again, and Alkhizr said to him, Let me know who thou art, and tell me thy tale. Thereupon Bulukiya related to him all his adventures from beginning to end, and asked, O my lord, how far is it hence to Cairo? 95 years' journey, replied the Prophet, whereupon Bulukiya burst into tears, then falling at Alkhizr's feet, kissed them and said to him, I beseech thee deliver me from this strangerhood, and thy reward be with Allah, for that I am nigh upon death and know not what to do. Quoth Alkhizr, Pray to Allah Almighty that he permit me to carry thee to Cairo, ere thou perish. So Bulukiya wept and humbled himself before Allah, who granted his prayer, and by inspiration bade Alkhizr bear him to his people. Then said the Prophet, Lift thy head, for Allah hath heard thy prayer and hath inspired me to do what thou desirest. So take fast hold of me with both thy hands and shut thine eyes. The prince did as he was bidden, and Alkhizr stepped a single step 384 forwards, then said to him, Open thine eyes. So Bulukiya opened his eyes and found himself at the door of his palace at Cairo. He turned to take leave of Alkhizr, but found no trace of him, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now when it was the 533rd night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Bulukiya, standing at the gate of his palace, turned to take leave of Alkhizr, he found no trace of him and entered the palace. When his mother saw him, she cried with a loud cry and swooned away for excess of joy, and they sprinkled water upon her face. After a while she came to herself and embraced her son and wept with sore weeping, whilst Bulukiya wept and laughed by turns. Then all his friends and kindred came and gave him joy of his safe return, and the news was noised abroad in the land, and there came to him presents from all parts. Moreover, they beat the drums and blew the flutes and rejoiced mightily. Then Bulukiya related to them his adventures, ending with recounting how Alkizar had set him down at his palace door, whereat they marvelled exceedingly and wept, till all were hoary of weeping. Hazib wondered at the queen's tale and shed many tears over it. Then he again besought her to let him return to his family. But she said, I fear me, O Hazib, that when thou gettest back to thy country, thou wilt fail of thy promise and prove traitor to thine oath and enter the hammam. But he swore to her another solemn oath that he would never again enter the baths as long as he lived, whereupon she called a serpent and bade her carry him up to the surface of the earth. So the serpent took him and led him from place to place, till she brought him out on the platform edge of an abandoned cistern and there left him. Upon this he walked to the city, and coming to his house by the last of the day, at the yellowing of the sun, knocked at the door. His mother opened it, and seeing her son screamed out and threw herself upon him and wept for excess of joy. His wife heard her mother-in-law weeping, so she came out to her and seeing her husband, saluted him and kissed his hands, and each rejoiced in other with exceeding joy of all three. Then they entered the house and sat down to converse, and presently Hazib asked his mother of the 385 woodcutters who had left him to perish in the cistern. Quoth she, They came and told me that a wolf had eaten thee in the Wadi. As for them, they are become merchants and own houses and shops, and the world is grown wide for them. But every day they bring me meat and drink, and thus have they done until the present time. Quoth Hazib, Tomorrow do thou go to them and say, My son Hazib Karim al-Din hath returned from his travels, so come ye to meet him and salute him. Accordingly, when morning dawned, she repaired to the woodcutters' houses and delivered to them her son's message, which when they heard they changed colour and saying, We hear and obey, gave her each a suit of silk, embroidered with gold, adding, Present this to thy good son, and tell him that we will be with him tomorrow. She assented, and returning to Hazib gave him their presents and message. Meanwhile the woodcutters called together a number of merchants, and acquainting them with all that had passed between themselves and Hazib, took counsel with them what they should do. Quoth the merchants, It behoveth each one of you to give him half his monies and mamelukes. And they all agreed to do this. So on the next day each of them took half his wealth, and going into Hazib saluted him and kissed his hands. Then they laid before him what they had brought, saying, This is of thy bounties, and we are in thy hands. He accepted their peace offering and said, What is past, that which befell us was decreed of Allah, and destiny doeth away with dexterity. Quoth they, Come, let us walk about and take our solace in the city and visit the hammam. Quoth he, Not so, I have taken an oath never again to enter the baths so long as I live. Rejoined they, At least come to our homes that we may entertain thee. He agreed to this, and went to their houses, and each of them entertained him for a night and a day, nor did they cease to do thus for a whole sennight, being 7 in number. And now Hazib was master of monies and houses and shops, and the merchants of the city foregathered with him, and he told them all that had befallen him. He became one of the chiefs of the guild, and abode on this wise a while, till it happened one day, as he was walking about the streets, that he passed the 386 door of a hammam, whose keeper was one of his companions. When the bathman, who was standing without, caught his eye, he ran up to him and saluted him and embraced him, saying, Favour me by entering the bath and there wash and be rubbed, that I may show thee hospitality. Hazib refused, alleging that he had taken a solemn oath never again to enter the hammam. But the bathman was instant with him, saying, Be my 3 wives triply divorced, and thou enter not and be washed. When Hazib heard him thus conjure him, he was confounded and replied, O my brother, hast thou a mind to ruin my house and make my children orphans and lay a load of sin upon my neck? But his friend threw himself at his feet and kissed them, saying, My happiness dependeth upon thy entering, and be the sin on the neck of me. Then all the servants of the bath set upon Hazib, and dragging him in pulled off his clothes. But hardly had he sat down against the wall and begun to pour water on his head when a score of men accosted him, saying, Rise, O man, and come with us to the Sultan, for thou art his debtor. Then they dispatched one of them as messenger to the Sultan's minister, who straightway took horse and rode, attended by 80 Mamelukes, to the baths, where he alighted, and going into Hazib, saluted him and said, Welcome to thee. Then he gave the bathman 100 dinars, and mounting Hazib on a horse he had brought with him, returned with him and all his men to the Sultan's palace. Here he bade them aid Hazib to dismount, and after seating him comfortably, set food before him. And when they had eaten and drunken and washed their hands, the wazir clad him in 2 dresses of honour, each worth 5,000 dinars, and said to him, Know that Allah hath been merciful to us in sending thee, for the Sultan is nigh upon death by leprosy, and the books tell us that his life is in thy hands. Then, accompanied by a host of grandees, he took him wandering withal and carried him through the 7 doorways of the palace, till they came to the king's chamber. Now the name of this king was Kharazdin, king of Persia and of the 7 countries, and under his sway were 100 sovereign princes sitting on chairs of red gold, and 10,000 valiant captains, under each one's hand 100 deputies, and as many headsmen armed with sword and axe. They found the king lying on his bed with his face swathed in a napkin, and groaning for excess of pain. When Hazib saw this ordinance, his wit was dazed for awe of the king, so he 387 kissed the ground before him, and prayed a blessing on him. Then the Grand Vizier, whose name was Shamha, rose and welcoming Hazib, seated him on a high chair at the king's right hand, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now when it was the 534th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the Wazir Shamha rose to Hazib, and seated him on a chair at the right hand of King Kharazdin, after which he called for food, and the tables were laid. And when they had eaten and drunken and washed their hands, Shamha stood up, while all present also stood to do him honour, and approaching Hazib said to him, We are all thy servants, and will give thee whatsoever thou askest, even were it 1/2 the kingdom, so thou wilt but cure the king. Saying this, he led him by the hand to the royal couch, and Hazib, uncovering the king's face, saw that he was at last fatal stage of the disease, so he wondered at their hoping for a cure. But the Wazir kissed his hand and repeated his offers, and ended with saying, All we want of thee is to heal our king. So he said to the Wazir, True that I am the son of Allah's prophet Daniel, but I know nothing of his art, for they put me 30 days in the school of medicine, and I learnt nothing of the craft. I would well I knew somewhat thereof, and might heal the king. Hearing this, the Grand Wazir said, Do not multiply words upon us, for though we should gather together to us physicians from the east and from the west, none could cure the king save thou. Answered Hazib, How can I make him whole, seeing I know neither his case nor its cure? Quoth the minister, His healing is in thy hands, and quoth Hazib, If I knew the remedy of his sickness, I would heal him. Thereupon the Wazir rejoined, Thou kennest a cure right well. The remedy of his sickness is the Queen of the Serpents, and thou knowest her abiding place and hast been with her. When Hazib heard this, he knew that all this came of his entering the baths, and repented Weena's repentance availed him not. Then said he, What is the Queen of the Serpents? I know her not, nor ever in all my life heard I of this name. Retorted the Wazir, Deny not the knowledge of her, for I have proof that thou knowest her and hast passed 388 years with her. Repeated Hazib, Verily I never saw her nor even heard of her till this moment. Upon which Shamha opened a book, and after making sundry calculations, raised his head and spake as follows, The Queen of the Serpents shall foregather with a man who shall abide with her 2 years. Then shall he return from her and come forth to the surface of the earth, and when he entereth the hammam bath his belly will become black. Then said he, Look at thy belly. So Hazib looked at his own belly, and behold it was black, but he persisted in his denial and said, My belly was black from the day my mother bare me. Said the Wazir, I had stationed 3 Mamelukes at the door of every hammam, bidding them note all who entered and let me know when they found one whose belly was black. So when thou enteredst, they looked at thy belly, and finding it black, sent and told me, after we had well nigh lost hope of coming upon thee. All we want of thee is to show us the place whence thou camest out, and after go thy ways. For we have those with us who will take the Queen of the Serpents and fetch her to us. Then all the other Wazirs and Emirs and Grandees flocked about Hazib, who sorely repented of his misdeed, and they conjured him, till they were weary, to show them the abode of the Queen. But he ceased not, saying, I never saw nor heard of the matter. Then the Grand Wazir called the hangman and bade him strip Hazib and beat him a sore beating, and so they did till he saw death face to face, for excess of pain, and the Wazir said, We have proof that thou knowest the abiding place of the Queen of the Serpents. Why wilt thou persist in denial? Show us the place whence thou camest out and go from us. We have with us one who will take her, and no harm shall befall thee. Then he raised him and bade give him a dress of honour of cloth of red gold, embroidered with jewels, and spoke him fair till Hazib yielded and said, I will show you the place. At this the Wazir rejoiced with great joy, and took horse with all his many and rode, guided by Hazib, and never drew rein till they came to the mountain containing the cavern, wherein he had found the cistern full of honey. They all dismounted and followed him as he entered, sighing and weeping, and showed them the well whence he had issued. Whereupon the Wazir sat down thereby, and sprinkling perfumes upon a chafing dish, began to mutter charms and conjurations, for he was a crafty magician and diviner and skilled in spiritual arts. 389 He repeated 3 several formulas of conjuration, and between each threw fresh incense upon the fire, crying out and saying, Come forth, O Queen of the Serpents. When behold, the water of the well sank down, and a great door opened in the side, from which came a mighty noise of crying like unto thunder. so terrible that they thought the well had caved in, and all present fell down fainting. Nay, some even died for fright. Presently there issued from the well a serpent as big as an elephant, casting out sparks like red-hot coals from its eyes and mouth, and bearing on its back a charger of red gold, set with pearls and jewels, in the midst whereof lay a serpent from whose body issued such splendour that the place was illumined thereby. And her face was fair and young, and she spoke with most eloquent tongue. The serpent queen turned right and left, till her eyes fell upon Hazib, to whom said she, Where is the covenant thou madest with me, and the oath thou swearest to me, that thou wouldst never again enter the hammam bath? But there is no fighting against fate, nor hath any ever fled from that which is written on his forehead. Allah hath appointed the end of my life for thy hand to hend, and it is his will that slain I be and King Karazdan be healed of his malady. So saying, she wept with sore weeping, and Hazib wept to see her weep. As for the abominable Wazir Shamha, he put out his hand to lay hold of her, but she said to him, Hold thy hand, O accursed, or I will blow upon thee and reduce thee to a heap of black ashes. Then she cried out to Hazib, saying, Draw near me and take me in thine hand and lay me in the dish that is with you. Then set it on thy head, for my death was foreordained from eternity without beginning to be at thy hand, and thou hast no power to avert it. So he took her and laid her in the dish and put it on his head, when the well returned to its former state. Then they set out on their return to the city, Hazib carrying the dish on his head, and when they were halfway, behold, the queen of the serpents said to him privily, Hearken, O Hazib, to my friendly counsel, for all thou hast broken faith with me and been false to thine oath, and hast done this misdeed, but it was foreordained for all eternity. He replied, To hear is to obey, and she continued, It is this, when thou comest to the Wazir's house, he will bid thee behead me and cut me in three, but do thou refuse, saying, I know not how to slaughter, and leave him to do it with his own hand and to work his wicked will. When he hath cut my throat and divided my body into 3 pieces, there will come a messenger, to bid him to the king. So he will lay my flesh in a cauldron of brass and set it upon a brazier before going to the presence, and he will say to thee, Keep up the fire under the cauldron till the scum rise, then skim it off and pour it into a phial to cool. Wait till it cool and then drink it, so shall not of malady or pain be left in all thy body. When the second scum riseth, skim it off and pour it into a phial against my return from the king, that I may drink it for an ailment I have in my loins. Then will he give thee the phials and go to the king, and when he is gone, do thou light the fire and wait till the first scum rise and set it in a phial. Keep it by thee, but beware of drinking it, or no good will befall thee. When the second scum riseth, skim it off and put it in a second phial, and drink it down as soon as it cools. When the Wazir returneth and asketh thee for the second phial, give him the first and note what shall befall him. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day and ceased saying her permitted say. Now when it was the 535th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the serpent queen charged Hazib not to drink of the first scum and carefully to keep the second, saying, When the Wazir returneth from the king and asketh for the second phial, give him the first and note what shall befall him. Then drink the contents of the second phial, and thy heart will become the home of wisdom. After this take up the flesh and, laying it in a brazen platter, carry it to the king and give him to eat thereof. When he hath eaten it and it hath settled in his stomach, veil his face with a kerchief and wait by him till noontide, when he will have digested the meat. Then 391 give him somewhat of wine to drink, and by the decree of Allah Almighty, he will be healed of his unhealth and be made whole as he was. And give thou ear to the charge wherewith I charge thee, and keep it in thy memory with carefullest keeping. They ceased not faring till they came to the Wazir's house, and he said to Hazib, Come in with me. So he went in, and the troops dispersed and fared each his own way. Whereupon Hazib set down the platter, and the Wazir bade him slay the queen of the serpents. But he said, I know not how to slaughter, and never in my born days killed I aught. And thou wilt have her throat cut, do it with thine own hand. So the minister Shamha took the queen from the platter and slew her, seeing which Hazib wept bitter tears, and the Wazir laughed at him, saying, O weak of wits, how canst thou weep for the killing of a worm? Then he cut her in 3, and laying the pieces in a brass cauldron, set it on the fire and sat down to await the cooking of the flesh. And whilst he was sitting, lo, there came a slave from the king, who said to him, The king calls for thee without stay or delay. And he answered, saying, I hear and I obey. So he gave Hazib 2 phials and bade him drink the first scum and keep the second against his return, even as the queen of the serpents had foretold. After which he went away with repeated charges and injunctions, and Hazib tended the fire under the cauldron till the first scum rose, when he skimmed it off, and, setting it in one of the phials, kept it by him. He then fed the fire till the second scum rose, Then he skimmed it off and, putting it in the other phial, kept it for himself. And when the meat was done, he took the cauldron off the fire and sat awaiting the vizier, who asked him on return, "What hast thou done?" And answered Hazib, "I did thy bidding to the last word." Quoth the vizier, "What hast thou done with the first phial?" "I drank its contents but now," replied Hazib, and Shamher asked, "Thy body feeleth it no change?" Whereto Hazib answered, "Verily, I feel as I were on fire from front to foot." The villain vizier made no reply, hiding the truth, but said, "Hand me the second phial, that I may drink what is therein, so haply I may be made whole of this ailing in my loins." So Hazib brought him the first phial, and he drank it off, thinking it contained the second scum. But hardly had he 392 done drinking when the phial fell from his hand, and he swelled up and dropped down dead. And thus was exemplified in him the saying, "Whoso for his brother diggeth a pit, he shall be the first to fall into it." Now when Hazib saw this, he wondered and feared to drink of the second phial. But he remembered the Serpent Queen's injunction, and bethought him that the vizier would not have reserved the second scum for himself, had there been aught of hurt therein. So he said, "I put my trust in Allah," and drank off the contents of the phial. No sooner had he done so, than the Most Highest made the waters of wisdom to well up in his heart, and opened to him the fountains of knowledge, and joy and gladness overcame him. Then he took the serpent's flesh from the cauldron, and laying it on a platter of brass, went forth from the vizier's house. On his way to the palace, he raised his eyes and saw the 7 heavens and all that therein is, even to the lote tree, beyond which there is no passing, and the manner of the revolution of the spheres. Moreover, Allah discovered to him the ordinance of the planets and the scheme of their movements and the fixed stars, and he saw the contour of the land and sea, whereby he became informed with geometry, astrology and astronomy and mathematics, and all that hangeth thereby. And he understood the causes and consequences of eclipses of the sun and moon. Then he looked at the earth and saw all minerals and vegetables that are therein and thereon, and he learned their properties and their virtues, so that he became in an instant versed in medicine and chemistry and natural magic, and the art of making gold and silver. And he ceased not carrying the flesh till he came to the palace, when he went in to King Carazdan, and kissing the ground before him, said, "May thy head survive thy vizier Shamher." The king was mightily angered at the news of the grand vizier's death, and wept for him, whilst his emirs and his grandees and officers also wept. Then said Carazdan, "He was with me but now in all health, and went away to fetch me the flesh of the queen of the serpents, if it should be cooked. What befell H that he is now dead, and what accident hath betided him?" So Hazib told him the whole truth, how the minister had drunk the contents of the phial, and had forthwith swelled out and died. The king mourned for his loss with mourning sore, and said to Hazib, "What shall I do without Shamher?" And Hazib answered, "Grieve not, O king of the age, for I will cure thee within 3 days, and leave no whit of disease in thy body." At this the king's breast waxed broad, and he said, "I wish to be made whole of this affliction, though after a long term of years." So Hazib set the platter before the king, and made him eat a slice of the flesh of the Serpent Queen. Then he covered him up, and spreading a kerchief over his face, bade him sleep, and sat down by his side. He slept from noonday till sundown, while his stomach digested the piece of flesh, and presently he awoke. Hazib gave him somewhat of wine to drink, and bade him sleep again. So he slept till the morning, and when dawn appeared, Hazib repeated the treatment, making him eat another piece of the flesh. And thus he did with him 3 days following, till he had eaten the whole, when his skin began to shrink and scale off, and he perspired, so that the sweat ran down from his head to his heels. Therewith he became whole, and there abode in him no trace of the disease, which when Hazib saw, he said, "There is no help for it but thou go to the hammam." So he carried him to the bath and washed his body, and when he came forth, it was like a wand of silver, and he was restored to health, nay, sounder than he was before he fell ill. Thereupon he donned his richest robes, and seating himself on his throne, deigned make Hazib sit beside him. Then he bade the tables be spread, and they ate and washed their hands, after which he called for the service of wine, and both drank their fill. Upon this all his viziers and emirs and captains, and the grandees of his realm, and the notables of the lieges came in to him, and gave him joy of his recovery. And they beat the drums and adorned the city in token of rejoicing. Then said the king to the assembly, "O viziers and emirs and grandees, this is Hazib Karim al-Din, who hath healed me of my sickness, and know all here present that I make him my chief vizier in the stead of the vizier Shamher." And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now when it was the 536th night, she continued, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that quoth King Carazdan to his ministers and high lords, He who healed me of my sickness is none other than Hazib Karim al-Din here present, therefore I make him my chief vizier in the stead of the vizier Shamher, and whoso loveth him loveth me, and whoso honoureth him honoureth me, and he who obeyeth him obeyeth me. Hearkening and obedience, answered they, and all rising flocked to kiss Hazib's hand and salute him and give him joy of the wazirate. Then the king bestowed on him a splendid dress of gold brocade, set with pearls and gems, the least of which was worth 5,000 gold pieces. Moreover, he presented to him 300 male white slaves, and the like number of concubines, in loveliness like moons, and 300 Abyssinian slave girls, beside 500 mules laden with treasure, and sheep, and oxen, and buffaloes, and bulls, and other cattle beyond count. And he commanded all his viziers and emirs and grandees and notables and mamelukes, and his subjects in general, to bring him gifts. Presently Hazib took horse and rode, followed by the viziers and emirs and lords and all the troops, to the house which the king had set apart for him, where he sat down on a chair. And the viziers and emirs came up to him and kissed hands, and gave him joy, his ministership, vying with one another in suit and service. When his mother and his household knew what had happened, they rejoiced with exceeding joy and congratulated him on his good fortune, and his quondam comrades the woodcutters also came and gave him joy. Then he mounted again, and riding to the house of the late Wazir Shamha, laid hands on all that was therein, and transported it to his own abode. On this wise did Hazib, from a dunsical know-nothing, unskilled to read writing, become, by the decree of Allah Almighty, an adept in every science and versed in all manner of knowledge, so that the fame of his learning was blazed abroad over the land, and he became renowned as an ocean of 395 lore and skill in medicine and astronomy and geometry and astrology and alchemy and natural magic, and the Kabbalah and spiritualism, and all other arts and sciences. One day he said to his mother, "My father Daniel was exceeding wise and learned. Tell me what he left by way of books or what not." So his mother brought him the chest, and taking out the 5 leaves which had been saved when the library was lost, gave them to him, saying, "These 5 scrolls are all thy father left thee." So he read them and said to her, "O my mother, these leaves are part of a book. Where is the rest?" Quoth she, "Thy father made a voyage, taking with him all his library, and when he was shipwrecked, every book was lost save only these 5 leaves. And when he was returned to me by Almighty Allah, he found me with child and said to me, Haply thou wilt bear a boy, so take these scrolls and keep them by thee, and whenas thy son shall grow up and ask what his father left him, give these leaves to him and say, Thy father left these as thine only inheritance, and lo, here they are." And Hazib, now the most learned of his age, abode in all pleasure and solace and delight of life, till there came to him the destroyer of delights and the severer of societies. And yet, O king, is not this tale of Bulukiya and Janshah more wondrous than the adventures of